What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 90 on this Friday, June 14th, 2024. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Friday. We're coming to you on a Friday because we were both at camp, Brent Venables Football Camp number 3 in Norman yesterday. We've got full standouts, new offers, all that coming out of the first 3 camps. We're going to break it all down for you on the show. And then on the second half, of course, we'll dive into what should be a very entertaining and interesting weekend on the recruiting front. Lots of high-profile visitors. Big visit recruiting weekend for Oklahoma coming up this weekend in Norman. Collin's got the goods there. We'll break all that down again to that as well a little bit in the back end of the program. But, CK, let's, of course, start with Brent Venables Football Camps. There's been 3 of them. I've been to 2. You've been to all 3. There's 2 more to go next week that we will both attend and talk about on next week's show. But as far as the first 3, there's been a lot of guys that have stood out. There's been a lot of new offers that have gone out. Where do you want to start? There's a lot of ways that we could go. Who's maybe the 1 or 2 names that jump to your mind right away that you want to get into first here?
Yeah, look, I think you have to start with the quarterback position, right? And so I'm curious for your take as well on these, but you got to begin with Oklahoma quarterback commit Kevin Sperry, Oklahoma 2026 quarterback target Jaden O'Neal, and then I think a guy who captivated everyone in the 2027 cycle in Peyton Houston. So Kevin was at all 3 camps. He knew that was the plan. He's now headed off to the Elite 11 finals, which will be huge for him. But he got more positional work with future quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator Seth Luttrell. We knew that this was a big time period for Kevin and his family because they knew how valuable it was to not only get one-on-one time with the coaching staff in a playing environment of sorts, but also Kevin gets to be around these other recruits, throw to them, maybe get some recruiting done on the side, and then, of course, help out the staff, make sure that they're getting a quality evaluation of these guys because he is, of course, a talented quarterback. And look, folks, I've not only been to all these Oklahoma camps, been to the SMU camp, TCU camp, been to a few others around the area. Quarterback talent isn't very frequent. And that's something that a lot of receiver guys kind of talk about. So Kevin was awesome. He had a really good trio of performances, and I think for Sperry, just not only having all that, but also kind of utilizing the Oklahoma coaching staff to button up his game before the Elite 11 finals, where he'll ultimately be put on a pedestal and be directly compared to some of the nation's best.
Sure.
Highly valuable opportunity for him, and he did exactly what he needed to do during those trio of camp moments. But then you, of course, see sort of the next in line and Jaden O'Neal. And so before he gets there, right, you and I were talking off to the side. And I was like, Josh, just wait. And you're like, oh, yeah, Jaden O'Neal's going to be here. And I was like, yep, just you're going to like what you see. And I believe you met me. You walked over from the other side of the sideline, getting video for us on the YouTube channel, which, folks, you guys can watch. Josh does a great job, of course, but Josh always cracks me up because I get his, like, immediate view of some of these elite players that I've seen before as, like, a unbiased third party. And when Josh gives me a look of, like, then I know. You know what I mean? And that's, that's exactly what we got out of Jaden O'Neal.
Yeah.
He was great. And look, I'd been told that's his setting. I had seen him in the National Combine in San Antonio. He was incredible there. He had a great day at OU's camp. Just, I don't know, man. The way he throws the ball is just a different level, right? And that's a combination of the zip on the ball to the accuracy to the ease in which he can generate power, all of that. And then, of course, by the way, he's 6'3", and a half, above 200 pounds, has that cool guy Cali quarterback vibe to him. Just very cool to see Jaden O'Neal literally like generate buzz on OU's campus before he even showed up. and then deliver on that promise. He was great. And then I want to briefly mention Peyton Houston, the 2027. I knew coming in too, he was going to be someone that captivated a lot of people. He's a little bit slighter, not the biggest guy, but man, like I was talking about it with someone at the camp. For someone his size to generate the power and velocity behind the ball that he does just seamlessly. I mean, it's a ball that it doesn't die down on a frozen rope from his hand to the receivers. And you can see that he's ultimately going to be considered one of the top quarterbacks in his cycle, that being 2027. Oklahoma, of course, offers him after the camp. That appears to be one of the primary targets for OU in that 2027 cycle. And I say it all the time, folks. I know you might be scoffing at 2027 or even 2028. Maybe there's a little bit more 2028 flavor coming. But if you're not recruiting those guys now, you're behind the 8 ball. And so part of this camp was, of course, getting in front of that. But Josh, I wanted to give you the floor as well because you got to see these quarterbacks in person, man. I thought they were all outstanding.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, Kevin Sperry obviously is, that deep ball is crisp. You know, he looked great. He looked very, very sharp. I think, honestly, the biggest thing with Sperry, and obviously, like we said, he looked great. He's throwing the ball well. It's kind of funny because, whenever he moved, he moves out of Carl Albert, he goes down south, there was a little bit of that, ooh, and we talked about on the show, and we eased people's concerns then of like, is this guy not as all in as he was before? He's been to all these camps, right? He's still coming to all the camps. He's still up here. I know Jeff Levy leaves. Is that going to, it hasn't affected anything. He still made his way up here for all these camps, just like he did last summer, working with these guys. And he's almost like an extra coach in that regard. He's so like a fabric of the program already without actually being there on the team yet. He's Kevin Sperry. He's a given. He's going to be there. He's part of the future of the program right now. But yeah, he looked great. Jaden O'Neal is wildly impressive. He was one of those guys that when he walked in the room, it was like okay, that's what it looks like. The size, just his arm strength and his mechanics, and just, I think of one throw in particular where it was nothing crazy. It wasn't even in one-on-ones yet, but he just kind of stepped back and it was like 40, 50 yards. He's just so easy, so effortless. He's really fun. And you see why he's so highly touted. I think he's our number 6 quarterback, right, in our current class rankings. He's big time. He looked the part, and you can see why he's so highly coveted. And I'm right there with you on Peyton Houston as well. Obviously, we went into the day kind of thinking this is a guy who probably is going to leave here with an offer, and he did. He performed very, very well. All the quarterbacks definitely stood out. And Jaden O'Neal, though, I definitely left yesterday a big Jaden O'Neal fan, and we'll see how that goes down the road. But he's big time. He looks the part, to say the least.
He threw a ball, to your point, that was incomplete, but it was like a outside to the comeback route where I believe either the receiver kind of dropped it or the DB made a good play on the ball. But it was such a good throw on a very difficult throw to make, which is kind of that outside comeback route, that he throws it falls incomplete, and I look up and see his trainer. We lock eyes and just go, man, just even the incompletes look really darn good. And so this is my last thing I'll say on him. This is primary target number 1 for Oklahoma at the quarterback position. I'm gonna have more. You've had really good, like, top performer stuff. My primary job at these camps right now is shake some hands, meet some folks, and get some pulses on some recruitments. I think that Jaden O'Neal is not only the highest of priorities for you in a cycle, by the way, folks. If you go look at 2026, he's in that top 6 range. There are a lot of dominoes already falling at the quarterback position in 2026. You got to get your guy, and you got to get one now. And I think not only has OU prioritized Jaden O'Neal, but I think that mutual interest is very much there. And so I think Jaden O'Neal's recruitment, the pulse that I get, I don't see this one lasting past this summer. I do see him as a quarterback who's going to want to commit like a year early and try and help his program build the class up. to this point, I think OU's the leader. And this camp, again, another moment that helped Oklahoma continue to further its standing with its top signal caller on the board in 26.
So he looked the part, to say the least. Obviously, there was a number of obviously a plethora of guys who hold OU offers at these things, but there's also a number of OU commits that took part, especially yesterday. There was 6 OU commits there yesterday, including Kevin Sperry. We talked about this a moment ago. I thought Malik Hawkins looked great. He was certainly, I think, someone that I'd never seen in person. I was really impressed with his physicality, the way he was able to kind of jam up some of these receivers. It was a pretty good wideout group there yesterday. He was really impressive to me. Alexander Shield Knight did some really nice things. He was one of the best guys in the morning. Marcus James looked the part. What about for you, maybe in regards to some other guys that stood out, whether it's commits or targets, just in general, that for you that caught your eye in these first handful of camps here?
Yeah, there's so many. And like you took a few right off the board. And like Shield Knight had a really good day. Malik Hawkins, I'm feeling really good about the incoming DB class for Oklahoma now, right?
Yeah.
Like Malik Hawkins, he told me in his commit story he felt like he was one of, if not the best, press man corners in the country. He came out, had a really solid day. But kind of on that note, I thought Tristan Haynes, the 2 appearances that he made, like you see the vision, right? Like we have Tristan Haynes ranked very highly because this is a height, weight, speed game. And especially on the perimeter, like Tristan Haynes is what it's supposed to look like at cornerback. Truly like a 6'1" to 6'2" guy, really long arms. You see the play speed. You see his awareness on the field. I really liked him. And I can tell that Oklahoma, between him and Malik Hawkins and, of course, Cortland Guillory, just a really quality group. But some other guys that come off the top, specifically related to yesterday's camp, Maxwell Robinson, the offensive lineman.
Right there with you.
What I'll say is this. I got some folks calling me after a camp down here in Texas. Got like 3 phone calls or texts. And they all started off with, what do you know about this Maxwell Robinson in Kansas? And I was like, well, I've heard he's pretty good. And they all were like, this dude's a bleak kicker, right? Like he's different. And he showed up, went from tackle to center. And he's not the tallest guy, but he definitely held his own. He stood out to me. I think one of my favorite watches to this point is Toa Katoa, the big man in 2026 from Trinity. He was outstanding when I watched him at SMU. He was outstanding when he got to Oklahoma. And he is going to be a fascinating case study because he kind of goes against what you're taught in the realm of like scouting offensive linemen. You would rather build them up than melt them down. He's going to have to rework the frame. And I know his camp has talked a lot about his diligence in terms of how he's trying to shed weight, add muscle, and continue to sort of rework his frame for the next level. But man, like he is so good. He's so good. And I love offensive linemen in camp settings where that usually goes against the O-line, right? I like O-linemen who then take the fight to the defensive lineman in that setting. And Toa Katoa did exactly that. When you can not only stonewall a guy without shoulder pads or anything like that, but then regain ground and push that dude off his marker, it's incredible. And the last one I'll say, a guy I really like as well, and look, I love the offensive line. If I went through all the skill guys, it'd take me forever. There have been some really good offensive linemen, and I thought Felix Ojo had one of the better performances as well at tackle. And I'm trying to mention guys here that Oklahoma really wants. Felix Ojo showed why not only Oklahoma, but like every school in the country is going to want this guy. He was so good as like a tackle who you look at him and physically he's got to add a lot of weight. He's got to come into his own from an offensive tackle perspective, from a frame wise like thing. But man, I told him after the camp, your game is far more advanced than I was expecting. He understands that he's 6'6" true. He understands he has very long arms, and he knows as long as I don't give up the inside, my length is going to be able to push out any defensive lineman that tries to run the hoop outside of me. He won almost every rep just making these defensive ends try to go outside of it because you can't. And so those were some of my favorite watches to this point. There were several others. Too many to count, but like in relation specifically to some current targets, those were some favorite watches. Any others that you wanted to touch on before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, especially on Maxwell Robinson. I thought he was pretty clearly the best offensive lineman of day 3 yesterday. He was really the one guy. There was a couple of D linemen early in the day. Alexander Shield Knight certainly in that category that kind of were having their way with most of the guys. He was really the one that was holding his own just fine. He actually won some reps against Shield Knight, who obviously is a year older than him and the guy who's committed to Oklahoma right now. So he did a nice job. He definitely stood out to me as one of the better guys. I mentioned Marcus James a little bit. Something that I noted this morning in a VIP standouts article, but Marcus James obviously, and it's true of a lot of guys, but in high school, obviously he plays tight end a little bit as well. That kind of showed when they were doing certain drills in which they would have to catch the football, because Marcus James had an ability to make a play on the football a little bit better than some of the other guys. And I think you could see that tight end background for him that played a part. So I thought he looked great as well. As far as guys who earned offers. Now, we talked about Peyton Houston a little bit already. There were obviously a number of others, and this is why it's a great time and a great reason to become a VIP subscriber, because we're kind of all over all these camps so far. We have a couple more to go, so we're not going to be able to get every single guy on the podcast. It's just not, unless we're going to go for 5 hours. But there's a couple other guys that picked up offers over the last couple of weeks that I think are certainly worth bringing up on the podcast. I think we're probably in agreement that we want to bring up. We can go ahead and start with them, Mr. Market. Is it Fakatau? Is that how we're going with the pronunciation?
I think so.
Fakatau? We're going to give it a shot. We better learn it dead on, because this kid, when I showed up to camp yesterday and Collin pointed this kid out and told me that he is a 2028, which means he's a freshman in high school. He hasn't played a down of high school football yet. My mind was blown. This guy was holding his own as well as anyone. He was blowing dudes up, and he's about to be a freshman in high school. He picked up an offer yesterday. Collin, this kid is insane. I mean, you would know better than me. You're around high-end players all the time, but this feels like a kid that's like, by the time it's all said and done here in a few years, his recruiting profile on 24/7 Sports is going to be friendly. He's already got a lot of offers. He picked up an OU offer yesterday.
From what I've heard in talking to some folks, this is the first rising 9th grader that like a Brent Venables led defensive staff offered. That should tell you.
There you go. Yeah.
How darn good he was. And this was another text that I received from somebody. That's the best rising freshman I've ever seen, regardless of position.
Yeah.
6'7", 265. I was texting with some folks yesterday, and this is what I'm going to say. When you consider the context, everyone, and I would encourage you at home while you're listening or watching the show, pull up a separate tab, pull up Marcus Fakatau. Considering the context of him being a 2028, he is going into his freshman season of high school football, just wrapped up his 8th grade year. Not only being a rising freshman, to go against junior and basically senior talent, and then the manner in which he won those reps, right? The fashion of wins. There were moments where, like, we're standing in the circle, and I remember, like, Rufus Alexander, who's been around elite football. Rufus Alexander would turn his head after this kid is going and be like, oh, my goodness. Yeah. Like, everyone on the Oklahoma staff is looking at this guy being like, dude, we got to offer him.
He was demolishing people. Yeah, I mean, he was demolishing guys. Not just winning, but demolishing. Yeah.
That's what I told some people I was talking to after the camp. I told them that's the best OU camp performance I've ever seen. When you realize he just finished up his 8th grade year and demolished.
Imagine playing against that kid as an 8th grader. Ridiculous.
It's mind-numbing. And, like, he's 6'7", 265, and he might grow. I can't tell you what the future looks like for him. He came into this camp with 8 offers already. I believe Notre Dame, USC, and a few other big-name programs had already extended opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
OU becomes his 9th offer. If that's not a 30 to 40 offer kid, I don't know. You know, there were parents coming up to his family during reps. Like, the camp isn't even remotely close to being done. And they were all saying, hey, your guy's going to be a future multimillionaire one day. Just know that. And
yeah,
so
it's crazy.
And folks, he was just in 8th grade, and his family's being told he's going to make millions of dollars. It's just mind-numbing to me.
Wildly impressive. Yeah, he was a monster, and it didn't take long for him, especially in one-on-ones, because obviously when they're doing the drills, you can look at the guy and be like, that's ridiculous, because it's not that he's just 6'7", but he's big. I mean, his calves, like, he really is. He's got size that you just don't. It's insane for a kid who obviously, again, was just in 8th grade, which is hilarious. Like, he was in 8th grade. He was sitting in 8th grade classroom, like, I don't know when they end school in California, but a month ago, we'll say. Crazy. But then, yeah, the fact that when they got to the one-on-ones against, some of these other offensive linemen, just dominating. Like I said, Maxwell Robinson, kind of tied back to that, was really one of the only guys who was able to kind of hold his own against him because he was ridiculous. Another one that picked up an offer yesterday, Caden Henderson, right, linebacker from Tampa, Florida. Different high school than Lewis Carter. I had that question. Different high school. He was really impressive. And Marcus James was probably the best linebacker, but Caden Henderson was a close number 2. He picked up an offer yesterday. He stuck out to me as certainly a guy that, you can kind of get the feel for it. When you're at these camps, you kind of see it like that kid. If he didn't have one already, obviously, that kid's probably leaving him here with an offer. And that's how things were trending with him, and that's how it went. What about for you, whether it's Henderson or other guys that picked up offers that stuck out to you?
Yeah, so not yesterday's camp, but a camp or two before, a couple names to know that I think are popular discussion topics. Oklahoma becomes the first school ever to offer Cooper Witten. And if you're sitting there going, that last name sounds familiar, his dad, who just happens to be his head coach and also happens to be one of the best tight ends we've seen, in Jason Witten. Pops, of course, was all-time great tight end for the Dallas Cowboys, Tennessee Volunteers. Jason Witten was at the camp chopping it up with everybody. And, you see these like dads who have played in the NFL or whatever, and you are always like, okay, I really hope this guy lives up to some of the excitement that's being generated by their father being there. And Cooper Witten not only delivered, but like he was more than deserving of that offer. For a while there, I was watching him, and I didn't know it was Cooper Witten. I was like, and this guy's got something. I kept referring to him as like 5'9", but I wasn't really talking to anybody, just kind of doing my rounds, watching. And then I go up to him and I'm like, hey man, what's your name? Like, you're having a really good day so far. I'm Cooper. He didn't say his last name. I'm Cooper. And I was like, hey, can you make sure that I got you on Twitter real quick? He plugs it in, goes back to the water lines. I look at my phone and I go, oh.
All right.
But man,
that adds up. Yeah.
But man, Josh, he had a really cool rep before I move on to the next, where I was like, man, he's got it. He gets on the field for one-on-ones. He sees, obviously, the offensive player come out. He recognizes interior alignment, right? So the receiver is tight to the quote-unquote formation or the ball.
Right.
He understands. You can see it click. It's like, okay, inside alignment, this typically means perimeter route. He meets the receiver kind of at the breakoff point, stays in the hip pocket, drives the receiver to the sideline. The sideline is your friend. And incomplete ball, and the OU staff was like, "Let's go, Cooper." They're all losing their minds, and I was like, "Man, this guy's got it. He's good." Cooper Witten was a really cool offer. Another guy I want to mention with NFL bloodlines, Jalen Pyle, who is a 2026 receiver. I really like him in the slot. He plays out here in the DFW Metroplex. Dad played at Virginia Tech and in the NFL, Willie Pyle. Jalen was really good, and I had been told that Oklahoma was keeping a close eye on him. He gets the offer. That's another player with NFL bloodlines who more than deserving of the opportunity. I want to mention real quick, offensive line, got to go back. One of my favorite watches was Evan Goodwin, 2026 offensive tackle from Arkansas.
Yeah.
Folks, he's like a true 6'7", 290. And afterwards, we chopped up for a while. And I kept singing his praises to him. And I was like, I'm not trying to gas you up, dude. But ladies and gentlemen, I've never seen a 6'7", 290+ pounder be like, I got next at center. It blew my mind. He went all 5 spots at 6'7", 290 and won reps pretty emphatically. And then the last guy I want to mention, we talked about Peyton Houston, but OU did make another 2027 quarterback offer to Trey Taylor. So now, of course, with Jaden O'Neal being in the spotlight in 2026 for Oklahoma, that 2027 quarterback board taking shape through these camps. So some offers that stood out to me.
We only scratched the surface. We're like a half hour in almost. This is why you come to be a subscriber. We've been at all these camps. You know, I've had a couple of standout things, but Collin's been obviously all over it. He has the vast majority of the coverage come out of camps, both in terms of the players that earned offers and have stood out, and then also, you know, what he's hearing on certain players, things like that. So again, become a VIP subscriber. There's still 2 more camps to go. The next Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to be at those camps, and then we'll talk about it next week on the show. It'll be Friday again, I assume. And we'll break all that down from these next 2 camps. Kind of similar format as today. And like Collin kind of referenced earlier, there is some highlights on the YouTube channel as well. I mainly limited that to commits for the YouTube channel, but I did post some other various highlights of Jaden O'Neal and some other guys last week on Twitter and things like that. If you want to go try and find those, I suggest you go. If you want to get hyped for Jaden O'Neal, go take a peek at some of those. You don't even like really need to watch where the ball goes. Just kind of watch him move around his mechanics, and you'll be like, okay, yeah, that's what it looks like. So, just scratch the surface there of camp stuff. It's been an awesome first few camps. A couple more to go, and we'll be there in Norman next week. But as far as this weekend, a number of guys are coming into town. It's not Champion Barbecue weekend just yet, but it's kind of a mini version this weekend. It seems like, at least. There's a pretty good number of guys coming to Norman this weekend. We'll kind of break that down and preview it a little bit. We'll start with the linebacker position. This is a spot that, last year they signed just one, right? And James Nesta. Now you're kind of coming in this next couple of cycles. What are some names here in that spot that are of interest coming in that are visiting this weekend to tell the people about?
This is what's tough about my job, right? Is we are out of these camps. I'm trying to wrangle the 2028 kids to figure out who they are if they're getting an offer. But people forget I'm also trying to step to the side and make phone calls because we've got a big official visit coming up in about 8 or so talents making their way to Norman. And you mentioned it. There are some premier prospects on this list. I do think it starts at linebacker. And the guy I want to talk about is Elijah Melendez. A lot will be made about this kid coming to campus. He is committed to Miami. And I've been having frequent conversations about him behind the scenes. And the current read I get is this. I think that a lot of people will talk a lot about Elijah Melendez coming to Oklahoma, and they will try to give OU fans maybe an inflated look at a potential flip. What I'll say is that Ole Miss took its swing recently and really threw a punch. I think that Ole Miss is going to have a say. I think that this is a linebacker that Brent Venables and Zach Alley specifically love. I had been told that Zach Alley was kind of the one who stepped in and immediately sort of helped Oklahoma build some resurgence with Elijah Melendez. But if you think Miami's going to let this one slip into the shadows, I think Oklahoma's going to have its work cut out for itself going into this weekend. Now, again, in my opinion, if Elijah Melendez isn't target number 1 at linebacker on the board for OU right now, he's 2 or 3. But Miami loves this guy. Ole Miss really likes him as well. The Canes, I've already been told, not only will do whatever it takes to keep him in the class, but they're pretty confident in their ability to do so. So going into this, Josh, Melendez is going to be one of the most talked about official visitors of the weekend. But I know that Oklahoma is going to have to make the most of this opportunity if they're truly going to get into the mix with someone that they really, really like at a position that we know Oklahoma covets heavily, considering who's on that staff.
And who the head coach is. Shifting from linebacker to, on offense, wide receiver, right? We've sang the praise of Emmett Jones on this show since he got the job, really. I mean, it's been a position that Oklahoma has just dominated, frankly, both through the portal as well as at the high school ranks, of course. Some names coming in this weekend at that position of interest to you as Emmett Jones continues to put in some work for Oklahoma at that spot.
Yeah, so a little bit of breaking news here that I do feel ties in. Now, don't everyone just chill. It's not related to Oklahoma, but it's got something to do with this stuff.
Yeah.
So Quincy Porter, the 4-star wide receiver out of New Jersey, has just now announced that he is committed to Ohio State. Why that's relevant, we know that the receiver spots in 2025 for Oklahoma are relatively limited compared to some of the elite talent that was on the board. Quincy Porter was going to be in for the Champion Barbecue next weekend. I have to assume that's no longer going to be the case. We know Emmanuel Choice is still out there, but I have also heard that Emmanuel Choice's recruitment is going to be pretty interesting coming down the stretch, and I'll have more for our VIP subscribers probably sometime today. But why do I think that's relevant? Well, knowing that a big name just came off the board, the 2 guys who are in town this weekend at wide receiver, number 1, Cortez Mills out of the state of Florida. And then a recent addition that's very intriguing to me, Josh, in Marcus Harris. You really got to figure out whether one of these 2 guys is actually going to potentially end up in your class. And so what I'll say on these 2, Cortez Mills, right now, Clemson, the 24/7 Sports crystal ball favorite. Tom Loy, one of our national recruiting analysts who does a great job. He just recently CB'd the Tigers in favor for Cortez Mills. I have heard that Cortez Mills to Clemson is very much on the table right now. I've heard he's telling a lot of people around him and whoever will ask him, if I'm being frank, that Clemson is the leader. But I reported this on our board. Like, it's weird because Cortez Mills has never necessarily been someone, in my opinion, that I've always kind of thought Oklahoma would have a serious shot at. But I have heard a time or two that Cortez Mills is still very high on Oklahoma. And I believe this will just be his second ever trip to OU. He took a spring unofficial, and I believe that was his first time ever being in Norman. So this will just be the second opportunity that Oklahoma takes to recruit him. But I know he really likes Emmett Jones. I know he really likes Oklahoma. I think he sees the vision under Seth Luttrell in that offense. So Cortez Mills is going to be an interesting one to follow because Clemson had him on an OV, I believe, and ultimately build this perceived lead. Now Oklahoma will try and at least do something similar. And then Marcus Harris. Emmett Jones sends out a tweet, a mysterious tweet. All it was,
going. Gets the people going.
No one knows what it means, but it gets the people going. It was just a crystal ball, and everyone just sort of starts freaking out on Twitter. When I was driving back after the OU camp, going back to Dallas, getting ready to do yard work at 9 o'clock at night, because that's my life right now. I get a text from a source saying, "You're not going to believe this," period. The next text was, that tweet was about Marcus Harris. I obviously was stunned. Then Marcus Harris officially announces, I believe a couple hours later, that he has finalized his trip to Norman. And here's why I think this is interesting. Marcus Harris at one point was highly coveted by Texas, but Texas is involved with 3 5-star wide receivers right now, and they're going to have 3 wide receivers in kind of their second tier on the board in town this weekend as well. And Andrew Marsh, who is an OU target, Kelshawn Johnson, and then Dalen McCutcheon. So Texas, what I'm saying here, they're going kind of all in on some other names at wide receiver.
Yeah.
Marcus Harris was also related to Georgia. I think Georgia has other targets that they're heavily involved with. Then he was supposed to go with some of his modern-day teammates to Oregon this weekend. That's no longer the case. Instead of going to Oregon, he will visit Oklahoma. And from what I've gathered early on in this process, UCLA is a heavy player. But if Oklahoma chooses to try and push in this recruitment this weekend, it feels like something's on the table here. Like there's something for the taking. And if Emmett Jones is making this late swing to try and get this guy on campus, that to me shows you there at least is some sort of window of opportunity for Oklahoma going into this thing. Couldn't tell you in the grand scheme of things truly how much Marcus Harris plays a role in the OU wide receiver board relative to those spots that we talked about. But hey, man, if there is mutual interest and there becomes a lot more of it coming out of this weekend, it's anybody's guess as to what happens next. So those 2 wide receivers, man, again, I don't know how many times we've talked about the wideout dominoes on this show, but this weekend feels pretty important relative to 2 names who are very much in the mix for those spots.
100%. We'll close with the visits with one more big name that OU fans we've talked about on this show many times, and OU fans are very familiar with. I think at this point, in the 5-star offensive tackle Michael Fasusi from Louisville, he's going to be coming to Norman this weekend. He's on that visit list. This is a guy who we talked about. He's a top 5 offensive tackle. He's a 5-star. I mean, he's big time, right? He's everything you want. Trying to bolster that offensive line. He's going to be in town this weekend. Does OU have a shot to make a move here? Where are you kind of at on Fasusi right now as he makes his way back to Norman this weekend for a visit?
Yeah, and folks, again, if you want to see the full visitor list, because there are other guys we're not going to talk about, save those for the subscribers, go ahead and sign up to Sooners Illustrated. But yes, I think everyone has kind of known not only that Michael Fasusi is visiting Oklahoma this weekend, I think everyone kind of knows this is OU's final shot at this guy. And I would argue, me being someone who lives about 3 minutes down the street from where Michael Fasusi plays football, I would argue, knowing his recruitment, that Oklahoma has been recruiting Michael Fasusi the hardest for the longest. There was a time where I pulled up to his high school and Oklahoma was clearly the program that was in the mix the most in his process. Now, roughly a year or so later, Texas is the heavy favorite. I believe Texas will be the visit after. And then he just visited Texas A&M, who has generated a lot of buzz, kind of becoming that second-tier team in this race, trying to overtake the Longhorns. So what I'm saying here, in what's perceived to be a big 3 battle, if you will, that regional 3, Texas has been at the top. Texas A&M is climbing. What is OU going to do? OU was the first to offer Fasusi's best friend, for lack of better terms, Sean Hutton, They were the first to offer Fasusi's close friend a preferred walk-on spot, which Sean Hutton earned, don't get me wrong. But Fasusi was on that visit with Sean, created a very memorable moment for both of them. I think that stands out. I think the fact that Bill Beanbo has been recruiting Michael Fasusi from the moment he was able to stands out.
Yeah.
I think that the development under Bill Beanbo as an offensive lineman, especially considering the fact that Michael Fasusi is one of the most truly elite overall profiles you'll find at the offensive tackle position in the country, but he's still got a lot to learn as far as being a true offensive tackle football player. The development under Bill Beanbo is going to be huge, but Texas can sell a lot. A&M, that new staff, they can sell a lot. And so I think Oklahoma is going to have a lot to accomplish, but I also think the thing that I would say is that OU has shown you time and again, there's a lot of intention behind their recruitment of Michael Fasusi. I think there isn't a world where Michael Fasusi leaves Norman this weekend and he doesn't know that OU is basically willing to do whatever it takes to try and get him in their class. Going into this, I still feel like Texas is where he lands. We know recruiting is quite a roller coaster. So how Oklahoma could potentially create an ebb or flow in this, they're at least going to have a chance to have Fasusi hear them out. And one thing we know about him, he's always kind of willing to let Oklahoma have their say. It'll be tough, but I know that a lot of people in Oklahoma are very excited about this. And I think Fasusi, he is already there from what he's told me. He's looking forward to it too. So I'm excited to see what comes out of the weekend.
Me too. It's going to be very interesting, both with him and just the weekend in general. I mean, obviously next weekend, if next weekend's the Champion Barbecue, this weekend is what? It's the potato salad, the Champion potato salad. Like, what's the appetizer for a barbecue? I don't know if there is one.
I didn't know you were going to go potato salad. That kind of.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. What's like a little side dish to a barbecue?
This kind of feels like almost like the grill out. Like we're just throwing dogs and burgers on the grill. Next week's the brisket and the pork butt and all that. You know what I mean?
Sure, 100%. So it's going to be a fun weekend. We're closing in on 43, 44 minutes, and we really only scratched the surface of both the camp standouts and, like Collin said, the visitors this weekend. So become a VIP subscriber. It's a great time for it. We've talked about it a couple times on the show. June, July are massive for recruiting. It doesn't slow down really much in August, and then the season's here. So it's a great time to jump aboard. Lots of coverage is there already and more to come as we're just really getting started in the summer here.
And by the way, real quick note, folks, another really fun aspect of my job right now. As of midnight tonight, college coaches can officially contact 2026 recruits whenever they want. That opens up a whole other world of the recruiting process because I kid you not, at 12:01 tonight, every elite 2026 recruit in the country is going to have about 8 phone calls coming in all at once. More coverage to come at Sooners Illustrated, at least to the best of my abilities as we get into these summer months.
You're telling me Jaden O'Neal might get a phone call or two, basically.
That is an understatement, but yes,
keep the ringer on. Keep the ringer on.
Do not do the do not disturb thing is what I tell guys all the time. Don't do it.
It's it's going to be a fun summer. It already has been. It's going to be a busy summer. And again, VIP subscriber, great time for it. Sooners Illustrated. And obviously, we've said it before, but not just us. You get the entire 24/7 Sports Network. We have a bunch of great national guys that also contribute a lot to the site. As an Oklahoma, obviously one of the big national brands in college football, we get the benefit of that as much as anybody. So become a VIP subscriber. Next week, James, Tom, and I will be back on Monday, and then Collin and I will, I assume, shoot for Friday again with the camp schedule. That's going to be a big show because we got Champion Barbecue, and then also going to wrap the final 2 camps. So be sure to tune in next week for us to wrap all that up with some final offers that go out and camp standouts, and then we'll get you all ready for Champion Barbecue next week at the stadium in Norman. Going to be a big couple of weekends in a row here. So looking forward to it. But CK, try to get some rest if you can. You were just in Norman with me yesterday. You're back home, but I'm going to see you again in Norman in just a few days. So you're burning the I-35 right now. Well,
yeah, all the recruiting action, and then, oh, by the way, I have to spend a few hours in the car every other day. It's really fun time right now, folks, but we're looking forward to keeping everyone in the loop with everything that's going on.
100%. So we'll see you guys back here next week. Again, become a VIP subscriber, and also be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel or the podcast if you listen to it in the more traditional sense, wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to subscribe there as well. That all really helps and adds up, all that good stuff. That's it for now. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.